I have a networking story. I was at a WHO meeting in Philadelphia with a bunch of scientists. I didn't know who they were. And like Nick says, you know, typically scientists are pretty introspective and withdrawn, as it were. And so I thought, I'm going to do something different today. I'm going to actually talk to people because there's all these important scientists from all over the world. And I thought, I'll just talk to the most important person here. And I looked around and there was one guy. Everybody's like, you know, typical scientists, dressed pretty shabbily. But there was one guy who was dressed really nicely with a jacket and a tie. I thought, okay, this is the guy who's obviously in charge for the WHO. So I went over and said, hi, my name is Cedric Pierce. I'm the CEO of Mycosynthetics, and we've got this huge collection of fungi, and we're using them to find new anti-malarial drugs. And he said, Dr. Pierce, I'm really happy to meet you. My name is Joe, and I'm your bus driver. This is a co-presentation.
I'm sorry. I'm just taking me a second to find it.
No, don't worry about the slides. I've given up on them.
Oh, perfect. Do you want one?
Because I think, you know, we're all scientists. You've heard a lot about people who work for large organizations and industry. And I think the thing that makes me a little bit different is that I work for myself and I have my own businesses, and I've done it for the last decade. And I'm a scientist. You see, I work with chemistry. I'm an organic chemist or biochemist. And that is something that's been with me for the last 30 years. So I've actually had 12 jobs. I just counted them up. But I left school when I was 16. I worked in a cement factory and worked in the lab in the cement factory. Then I worked in a hospital lab and was exposed to biochemistry and all that kind of thing. And then I went to university and studied biochemistry and chemistry. And then I went to JPCL in Paris to study natural products chemistry. And then I went to the University of Illinois, the chemistry department there. And I actually had a job there. And then I went to the University of Connecticut and taught pharmacy. And then I worked as a visiting scientist at Bristol Myers in Wallingford. And I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, they do real research in industry. It was a fantastic place with lots of support. And then I got another job in American Cyanamid. Actually, that's where Nick and I kind of overlap in American Cyanamid a little bit. I was in Pearl River and Nick was in Princeton. But working for big companies is fine. But you know what really drives the economy? Small companies, small inventive companies. If you look at the patenting rate of small companies versus large companies, it's about 15 times greater. And the reason is because there's a hell of a lot more innovation going on in small companies. So if you really want to if you want to take some risk, okay, there's a risk, right? The risk is they don't have deep pockets. Small companies don't typically have deep pockets. So that's the risk. And they might lay you off. But you know, big companies lay people off too. And this year alone, Pfizer has laid organic chemists off, Bristol Myers, but BMS, I beg your pardon, has laid organic chemists off. Merck has laid organic chemists off. Okay, so big companies do that too. And then, of course, small companies do. So I joined a company called MicroSearch, a little company here in the park. We sold the company to a biotech company. That was quite nice, since I own part of the company. And then I worked for, I'm not sure how crass it is to talk about money, but because we're all scientists, right? We just want to talk about publications. Yeah. But the great thing about, you know, working for yourself, you know, typically there's a range of salaries, but when you work for yourself, there's no range. So the upside, of course, is you can pay yourself as much as you can afford to pay yourself. The downside is, if you don't have any money, you don't get paid anything. So that's one of the upsides. So then in 2000, I took a sabbatical and worked for a life science venture capital company. I'll never do that again. I worked in an office. There was no smell to the place. You know, it was clean and nothing was really going on. It's just a bunch of officers, no labs. So I did that for a year. I thought, this is terrible. I'll start my own business. During that year, I read 2 business plans a day for a year, basically. So, and the idea was we'd try and find some interesting life science companies to invest the $100 million that we had sitting around. Oh, that's true, by the way. So I decided to go and start my own company. How difficult can it be? I started Mycosynthetics. I incorporated it as an S corporation. I had no idea what I was doing. I borrowed one of the largest collections of filamentous fungi in the world. I borrowed it from OSI Pharmaceuticals, who had been a previous employer. and I subsequently bought the collection. I bought a lab full of equipment. So I actually owned equipment. It's really interesting when you actually own your own GC. It's kind of an interesting feeling, for example. And I've done it for the last 10 years. So our 10th anniversary is in August. I started 2 other businesses. Well, one was a sort of cheating business. There's no rules about it, okay? So I started an LLC. It's kind of for a joke. But I've got fed up with paying rent. So I know what I'll do. I'll buy a building and rent it back to Microsynthetics. So then I'm on somebody else's payroll, and that's what I did. So I bought a warehouse in Hillsborough. When I say I started an LLC, and it was called Research Triangle Lab and Flex Space Leasing Company. It's like Gilbert and Sullivan. There's no rules about this. You can make, so it's completely absurd, right? Who the hell would call a company that? And I bought a building, and I leased it back to Microsynthetics. So that's nice, right? So I'm now getting the rent. So I thought that was cool. The nice thing about that is, because there's risk with when you have your own business. The risk is that you'll run out of money and go bankrupt. And you really want to avoid that if you can at all do it. I have job security. So, there's very few people who can say that. I don't have tenure, I have job security, because I'm not going to fire myself. I have the freedom to do whatever I want. So, for example, we work on malaria, cancer with Nick, TB, leishmaniasis. We're just moving into working on drug-resistant parasitic diseases. So it's just great. And I don't have to ask anybody to do that. I just have to find the funds to do it. So in a way, it's a kind of soft money job. Okay, I loved Nick's advice, don't panic. I once had a slide with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on where they got don't panic on the cover. It's brilliant advice. I don't know what else to tell you. So when I'm hanging out with other CEOs, I tell them I have 55 synthetic chemists working for me because I've got this huge collection of fungi. No, fungi are fantastic synthetic chemists. Did you know that? You obviously have never heard synthetic chemist's prayer. I don't know if Lord, I fall upon my knees and pray that all my syntheses will no longer be inferior to those conducted by bacteria.